Well, we're here with another edition of the radio show with Mark Lee. And of course, I've got a chance to talk to Joe Forish, who is a CFA and definitely involved in the accounting space over there in that very popular city of New York. And of course, we've got a number of shows that are oftentimes that hear about the financial lane and the fiscal lane. And I was actually telling Joe that earlier. So I'm looking forward to hearing some of his thoughts about some of the things that are going on in the world and whether enough people are even paying attention to what is happening in the world of their own personal finances or in the world of even having a balanced budget and all in that space. So I'm going to bring Joe up and we'll have a one-on-one conversation and all in that line. So Joe, glad you are able to make it. And I know that you got all kinds of honors, including that Dale Carnegie course that you took where you got the highest award for achievement. And that is definitely something that folks should be very much proud of and all in that space. And of course, you've definitely been doing a lot of work in New York, and definitely New York is seen as the hotbed of the financial industry since a lot of the Wall Street businesses are definitely Wall Street is based there, and a lot of the companies are based there as well, even though we know that there are some from around the country and even around the world as well. So I guess the first thing that I've got to find out from Joe is that you always know that you were going to balance your own budget, and are you always the financial person in the family, or are you one of those folks that were sitting there learning about this much later and then decided that you wanted to go into the field of finance? Joe, I cannot hear Joe. I'd have to check his audio because I'm not hearing him. He's hearing me and everything, but I was asking Joe all kinds of questions, and we're going to see what's going on.
How about now, Mark? You
now
got
I
me?
hear you. Yeah,
Okay.
now I hear you. Oh, he just disappeared. So we'll see if Joe can come back on. I'll be waiting for Joe to see when he comes back on. And of course, we'll have some other conversation and everything. And while we're doing that, we're going to play this commercial from Truso.
I'd like you to imagine with me, if you will, opening an app where you can collaborate with like-minded individuals from around the world, get inspiration and in-app tools to launch and grow your business, as well as share your knowledge and earn compensation, all in one app. Well, the name of that app is Truso, short for Truly Social. Hi, I'm Matthew Newman, the founder and CEO of Truso. A new concept in social media, Truso is designed from the ground up to be a platform that's both social and empowering for all its users. How exactly do we do that? I'm glad you asked. First, Truso brings the world together via video. Psychologists assert that video provides a significantly more effective connection than audio only. When you enter a community on Truso, you're face-to-face. Second, on Truso, you don't have to have 1 million followers to monetize. Our business model allows all hosts and moderators to monetize, no matter the size of your following, by 1, producing fee-based content, and 2, inviting others to join the platform as subscribers. Even more, Truso has an in-app resource library with over 100 free resources, forms, and documents to help you build your brand and grow your business. Third, Truso is inclusive. The deaf and hard of hearing communities make up 360 million people worldwide. Unlike audio-only apps, Truso embraces this community, providing a networking platform that allows them to participate via video and closed captions. We even have a deaf and hard of hearing foundation in the works as well. Fourth, Truso is both social and safe. We refer to Truso as a virtual extension of the beauty shop, barbershop, and brainchild of the community. A place where there's laughter, along with wisdom, growth-oriented conversation, and genuine connections in a safe space. Truso even has proprietary security to ensure we maintain a safe environment for everyone. Where are we at now? Truso is live, y'all. We've launched in beta and we're acquiring users daily. We have an incredible development and marketing team, plus amazing celebrity influencers at the table, helping us spread the word around the globe, beginning within the African diaspora and beyond by creating a safe space for growth, connection, and collaboration. We're truly excited about Truso. We've created something special for which there is a global market. And we invite you to embark on this journey with us as a shareholder. The future for Trousseau is truly bright. Join us and let's go there together.
All right, then we're back and everything. Like I said, just had to get that commercial break and everything. But as I was asking Joe, is that something that you always knew that you wanted to get into? Was this whole notion of entertainment, well, not entertainment, but the whole notion of finance and all of that? So is that something that you always knew that was going to be in your track record and everything in those lines? Or were you the one that was getting that allowance, balancing your budget, or either did this whole field come about much later in life after you realized the importance of having that balanced budget, which we all know we're oftentimes not that good at because sometimes we'll spend stuff on frivolous items or on necessary items that can sometimes cost a lot, like gas and, of course, some food in the house and everything. But I was just wondering, maybe you were one of those kids that got that allowance and were selling lemonade and knew that you were going to be in the finance lane from the beginning.
Hi, Mark. It's great to meet you. To answer your
Yes.
question, I feel like I came that way. I was always very financially responsible. I did run a lemonade stand when I was a kid. And I actually had a lot of profound influences when it came to the money quotient, so to speak, in my life. I did have an allowance as well for taking care of the dog and taking care of the furnace in my childhood home. But a few stories stick out to me. And one I would say was there was a local businessman by the name of Mr. Klein,
Mhm.
and he ran a shoe store, and it was on the main corner of town. And it was this large, big brick building, and one of those old classic storefronts where when you walk in, there's the glass display on both sides. So as you're walking into the store, you could see all the goods on each side. And he sold a lot of sneakers to a lot of the kids in town. So I would go there for my sneakers with my parents. And he was a great man. Very, very nice, very humble, very just very down to earth. And there was always this smell of leather in the store as well, because it was a blue collar area where I grew up. And in those days, he sold what people called working boots, and he sold a lot of boots. So there was that big emanating smell of leather in his store. And I was very intrigued by him. And I asked him, Mr. Klein, how do you run such a great business? Everyone in town, everyone from out of town comes here to buy all their things that they need. And he told me that, the best thing in business to do is to worry about the pennies and the dollars will add up. And he was right. The next day I opened a savings account at the bank, and I would check my interest statement every month to see how much I earned on my money sitting there while it was essentially doing nothing. But I was getting paid to have my money in the bank when I was a kid.
Wow, that's amazing. You're getting paid to have the money in the bank. And as you were saying that, a couple of things crossed my mind. One is the founders of the network, and I might see if they can come by and chat with us as well after they get done with what they were working on as well. But I do know that they are big fans of fiscal literacy. Both Kim Calhoun and Nick Palveda oftentimes talk about fiscal literacy and how important it is to have that in our school systems. And they're oftentimes frustrated because they don't think that there have been any courses about even budgeting. And we know that we're in the middle of the federal government putting out their latest budget for 2024. And we were actually having a discussion about this on the news show earlier today, where are there any good courses about budgeting on the college level? And should those courses be in the high school and maybe even earlier levels in that space? So I know that they are big proponents of fiscal literacy and the fact that they don't feel that our schools are doing enough teaching about that. But I was just wondering your thoughts on that, and if that is something that you would agree with them that we need to be having more knowledge of, and was it something that you were even taught in your own education and school system, or is it something that you got to learn when you got to be a little bit on the older side?
I would agree with you, first of all, that there is a large need for greater financial literacy starting at a very young age in our school systems. So yes, I agree with you there 100%. For my experience, like I said, I learned a lot about just finances around being around to people in a small town where it was tough. Times were tough. A lot of people lived paycheck to paycheck. It was hard, but there was an alertness and awareness that people needed to be smart about their money because not a lot was coming in. And unfortunately, a lot was going out when you're having a family raising children. But aside from that, I would say that I learned more about it when I got to school, when I got to university. I majored in finance and started learning there about what finance really is, how does it work, the benefits of saving early for retirement is a great story that I actually had in one accounting course that I took my sophomore year.
Hmm.
The professor there, he was very, very um, helpful in saying that it's best to start saving early because if you start saving, let's say at 18 or 19, if you try to start saving at 30 years old, there's no way you could ever catch up because you have that essentially that compounding of money. Much like my earlier example that I talked about putting money in the bank as a young kid, there is this idea of compounding that once the money starts building and building and building, it essentially can become exponential. And the earlier you start in life, the better off you'll be as you go through.
I don't know what it. But one of the things I was curious about is how for you to have that ability to have that conversation with the working class, even in your own work. Because as you were talking earlier about that shoe shine person, I was actually remembering a dear friend of mine who, as far as I know, is still around and everything. And he was actually Mr. Shoe, Roger Brown, who had a science background. It was a well-known local scientist here, but then he opened up a shoe repair shop. And one of the
Oh,
things we
wow.
were trying to do was get people to learn the trades and even learn about possibly going into his business of shoe trades and all of that and fixing shoes. He fixed some Forshems for me and some other brands of shoes. So I was just wondering that a lot of times I would learn some very valuable life lessons and even financial lessons from his business and the way he was doing business. He actually bought a property in downtown Durham before the properties in downtown Durham, North Carolina became the prices that they are now. So he got it at a relatively cheap discount because at the time that he bought that property, there wasn't as much development in downtown, but the downtown is starting to flourish. But this was at a non-peak time because we do know that cities can have ebbs and flows. So he got it at a pretty much what would be considered a song and a dance and everything type price, and definitely has been a advocate for entrepreneurship and all in that space and has been for decades in that way. But I'm just wondering how important was it for you to have those kind of conversations? And do you think that that is something that is going on enough as well, that we're hearing enough of people being encouraged to go into entrepreneurship? Because I do know that part of the work that you do with your company, Fort Rove Partners, is guiding tech founders and tech employers into ownership. And I do know that sometimes they can get a little daunted by the financing because I know some people that have been looking at some businesses that they want to start, and oftentimes they don't have the budget or they're a little bit daunted by the whole financial lane and everything. So I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the company and what kind of work y'all are doing with the tech folks and the importance of having those kind of mentors that I just mentioned when I mentioned Mr. Brown and you mentioned with your shoe guy as well.
Yes, definitely. I think that it's important for people that are starting businesses, running businesses, to have someone to guide them, to help them along their way because they're focused on running the business, whether it's a shoe company or a technology company or anything in between. I think it's really important to have someone to focus on those areas, metrics for you, especially an expert who can help with that. And in terms of my role at Fortrove, I focus on helping tech founders and tech employees who have ownership stakes in companies, whether they're publicly traded or privately held. And I essentially help them understand what they own, help them maximize their wealth and minimize their taxes. And I do it in a way that they're able to give everything to me, give me the reins, and they could focus on their businesses, on their lives, on their career, and don't have to worry about doing it on their own.
Yeah, to check on something else as well. But one of the things that I about is, um, do you think that you have gotten enough of support that you need from people as well? Because that's one of the other conversations we have regularly on the network is how a lot of times people are hearing that inner critic and that outer critic. And I know that that is something that also comes up in the financial lanes as well. So I was just wondering, how did you go about that? Did you have the support of, you mentioned definitely having the support of your parents and other folks, but sometimes there is not enough of that support. And sometimes you are worrying about what those, that inner voice is telling you about why you're not going to be successful enough, whether that's in your work or whether that's in a number of other things. And then, of course, we do know that outer critics, whether that's in the family or in our community, can also weigh down on us as well. So I just wondering yourself how you dealt with that and some of the ways that you address that.
Yeah, dealing with inner critics and outer critics is always a big part of running your own business. And especially it happens. It happens for everyone. It happens for famous founders. Know well their names. Phil Knight. Steve Jobs. All those big names, and they'll tell you straight up, yeah, they had self-doubt. And I think in terms of really being focused on what it is every day at every point in time, for me, it's important. So I asked myself, okay, there's 10 things I need to do. What is the most important thing I need to do right now? And I know that if I complete that, then I go to number 2, number 3, etc. And I build momentum for myself, and I keep moving in the direction that I want to go, where I want to go. So a lot of it is around planning and structuring, not just my day, but my week, my month, my year. I put everything on a calendar. I have everything very well organized, and keep moving toward those goals in order to build my business. In terms of outside support, I've had a lot of great mentors along the way. And I look back on those lessons that I've learned from them when it comes to building a business, and you're staying positive, being focused. And one person that actually really sticks out to me is one of my old basketball coaches. His name is Mr. Fulton.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to go to him as a kid as extracurricular to actually learn really how to play the game of dribbling well, shooting good jump shots, etc. And he was a very big confidence builder for me. He would always build my confidence, boost my confidence in any part of the game. And over the years, that overlapped from time on the court to time spent in real life. And it was a tremendous experience for me to go through that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the thing about having those windfalls, and we do know that athletes can have tremendous windfalls. I'm actually definitely glad that my team won the Big East title and is now heading to the Big Dance, because I did attend Marquette University way back
Fantastic.
in the 80s, and looking forward to seeing what they do. Shaka Smart is an amazing coach. I'm looking forward to seeing what he's going to do in that space. But whether it's athletes or whether it's people winning the lottery, we do know that sometimes they can get that big check and that big lifetime money and everything. And unfortunately, there are too many stories of folks that have gone broke after the fact. So I was just wondering if you could share some of those cautionary tales that you are aware of, because I do know that too often people think that as soon as they get the money, they can go out and buy their parents that house that they always wanted, or go on those trips that they always wanted. But of course, those trips and those houses aren't always cheap. So sometimes you might have to change those goals that you have. And of course, we do know that anytime you get big windfalls, not that I've had this experience, but those that have had it have told me that you get everybody and their mother coming out of the woodwork trying to tell you how they are related to you, or how they have the greatest project since sliced bread that you need to help finance. So I just wondering some of your thoughts around that.
Yeah, when it comes to a windfall, it's very, very hard not to want to buy the house, buy the car, go on a vacation, whatever it is that the person wants. Because I think a lot of times the mind will play a trick on you. It's like, okay, I got this large sum of money. I'm going to get another lump sum next year, or the year after, 5 years down the road. And it's going to keep on coming in. But a lot of times that's not the case. And it's better to be prudent and understand, okay, like I've just received this large sum of money. Chances are pretty slim that I'll get these large chunks as I go through my life, my career. So it's best to be prudent and invest this money in a way that will leave me something for my future self. So I think a lot of it is thinking about when the person gets a large sum of money, that they could try to picture themselves older when they're retired, perhaps, and really think about how it is that they want to live and think back to where they are today and what actions can they take, what decisions can they essentially make in the monetary department that will lead them to that decision or lead them to that vision of what it'll look like in retirement. I'm sure they're not looking at themselves as being in a tough situation or being destitute, but being somewhere nice, wherever that may be. Maybe it's on a beach or in a nice home with a family. And I think really the imagery and the messaging around telling oneself that and how that interplays into what you're doing today, tomorrow, next week is really beneficial for people who get those windfalls.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But even if you don't have the windfalls and you're just dealing with day-to-day life and everything, I do know that there are a number of service fees that we get hit with on a regular basis if you go into overdraft or a number of other things that we don't think about until after they happen and all in that space. And then there is also this notion of certain things that you're supposed to spend not a certain amount of and everything. So I think I want to say that if you're spending more than 30% on your housing, they say that is wrong. I want to say that they say don't spend more than 20 to 20%, and maybe it's even less than that on your day-to-day food and your day-to-day consumptions of dietary things that you might need and everything, but just the things that you need to survive, which of course is drink like water and stuff like that, and of course the food substance and all of that. But I do know that I'm even guilty of eating out way too much, and I'm sure many other folks even in your own lane are guilty of that as well. So I know that there are programs like Mint, and I think there's one called Rocket something as well that will help you try to keep track of your spending. But that's a matter of you have to enter the data correctly in order for it to even give you the results that you want in terms of keeping track of what you're spending and all of that. So are those kind of rules of trying to stay within your spending limits still legitimate today? And do you find that most people are doing that? Because I know that in this modern day, with housing prices the way that they are, many people might be spending anywhere from 40 to 50% of their income coming in on just some place to stay. And we won't even talk about the food, since we know that during the pandemic, a lot of people started going to DoorDash and started, when the restaurants opened back up, going to the restaurants and all in that space. So what is your thoughts about when you're spending too much money and how to handle spending that much money that is outside of the realm? Because everybody wants their leisure activities as well, and a lot of those are not cheap, particularly if you're trying to go see a major star concert or even a major play these days, because a lot of those, it's about what the market can bear. Does the market can bear $1,000 tickets? I guess that's what you got to pay, unless you're going to watch it on pay TV or one of the other outlets that is a lot freer and everything. But I was just wondering your thoughts around some of those things that I brought up as well.
Budgeting is very important. It's very powerful because there's only so much. If there's a piece of pie, there's only so much pie to go around.
Right.
And there's a piece for housing, there's a piece for food, there's a piece for leisure activities, there's a piece for savings, there's a piece for retirement, etc. And there are rules of thumb around these, and you were much spot on what you said. And there is some leeway on some of the areas, but then there needs to be some give and take on the others. But the biggest problem I see with people who make a budget is that they typically don't stick to it. They'll use a software provider, or they use a spreadsheet or a pencil and a paper. And if you actually were to compare what they plan on their budget to what they actually spend, the discrepancy is very large.
Right.
So a lot of what comes down to that is like, okay, the person's making an effort to build a budget to do the right thing, but they're having trouble changing their behavior around what it is they're actually spending. So I think a lot of this comes down to a person aligning their values with what they want to spend their money on. And if they really feel like spending the money on this one particular item aligns with the value, whether it's clarity or being outside or feeling better in a way, I think it's a good thing for them. But there are only so many values that you could ascribe to in order to live a decent financial life. So there is behavior change involved. There is things like sacrifice as well. And it's hard. It's very hard in today's world to do that. But I think once someone starts making those little changes, which at first could feel uncomfortable, but the only way to grow is to really feel uncomfortable. Otherwise, you're just going to do the same thing over and over again. So the punchline is, okay, great on the budget. Try to actually stick on it. If you're having trouble, align the values, get a little bit uncomfortable and what it is you're actually doing to try to keep some money in your own pocket.
That makes a lot of sense and everything. I want to go to a quick commercial break, and then we're going to hear from one of our sponsors, including one of the people that actually is one of the founders of this particular company and everything. And I'll come back because I definitely want to hear about the dark side of finance and also how we can make finance interesting and all in that space, because those are two things that, as I was thinking about you and talking about our questions, were coming to my mind and everything. But I definitely want to come back to you in a minute or two. So give me about 2 or 3 minutes. We're going to run a couple of these quick spots, and then we'll be back with learning about the dark side of finance, because we do know that that is something that people are concerned about as well.
One of the things that business owners forget a lot is to prepare for their own retirement.
Hi, my name's Nick Palavita, and today I'm with a very special guest, a certified financial planner, a chartered retirement plan specialist, and president of National Pension Partners, Max Couliet. Max, tell me what you do at National Pension Partners.
Well, Nick, we help successful small businesses and professionals put together retirement plans that provide them the maximum retirement benefits and big tax deductions at the same time.
Well, how do you do this?
Well, we get on an internet conferencing system with the client. We review their goals, what they want to accomplish, and then put together strategies to help them in implementing a retirement plan that benefits them, not everybody else.
Well, that sounds really good, but how much does this cost?
Well, it's really not bad because the first consultation is free. That allows us to go through and discover whether this strategy works for that business and for you as the business owner, and helping you maximize your retirement.
Well, Max, how do we get this free appointment?
It's really pretty simple, Nick. You can either go to our website below or call us at 877-252-1692, and then we can set up a time with either myself, Nick, or one of our other retirement plan specialists, another CPA or advisor in the office, to go over this with you and make sure it fits for you.
Hi, my name is Lewis Haupt. I work with National Pension Partners, and I work with businesses to allow them to put the maximum away that they can for themselves and to save taxes.
Hi, I'm Brad Coyle, and I'm the brokerage manager at National Pension Partners. We're always analyzing plan fund choices in order to ensure the participant's success.
If you want more information on how we can help you and your business put more money away in a retirement plan than you ever thought possible, contact us at the website below or call us at 877-252-1692.
I love to introduce somebody really awesome. He is a master of training other speaker, and he is a great speaker because I saw him speaking, and he hardcore. He looks like athlete. He looks like a fighter. But when he starts speaking, he speaks with a real warm heart and really touch people's heart and really fascinate people.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs and square holes. They're not fond of rules and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them or disagree with them, glorify or vilify them, but the one thing you cannot do is ignore them. Because they change things, they push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones that do.
Reuben West communicates by connecting with his audience when he presents and when he's sharing a key message. Being able to connect and communicate your instructions clearly is a masterful skill.
The ultimate professional. Reuben is a guy that not only teaches a message, but also demonstrates the message. He's helped me to craft my art, and I'm sure he'll help you to craft yours.
Very accomplished international speaker being able to just connect to any audience, no matter where they come from or what kind of people they are. He helps you and serves you in every kind of way to elevate you as a speaker, and I highly recommend him.
He is a people's heart connecting scientist who is using instrument of your voice and your appearance and your heart to touch people's heart.
His communication is unmatched. I'm Australian, he's American, and it really makes no difference as to our culture and where we have come from, because his message, the way he communicates it, is from humanity.
Find a way to take the next step. Thank you.
And as you can tell, even those speakers were dealing with financial literacy and all in that space as well. But one of the things I was curious about, and I said I was going to get to that when I got to talking to you and everything, was the dark side of finance. So I imagine that some people are sitting there looking at this collapse of a bank down there in Florida, as well as the collapse of I think it was a bank in New York as well, and they might think that that's the dark side of finance. But I also mentioned that there is this lovely notion of bank fees, and bank fees can get you, because I know they've been getting me for years, because sometimes you don't always pay attention to your budget, and then you turn around and you're like, wait a minute, I probably spent at least a good month's worth of salaries in the bank fee. So that might be one of the dark side of finances that you're talking about as well. And then, of course, we know that there are the various hustles that are out there as well. Because I remember there was a time that people used to get those lovely big checks, and they would say, you know, go cash the check, and then you go cash the check, and then you find out that the check wasn't a real check, but the bank did tell you that that it wasn't a real check. The bank told you it wasn't a real check, and then you had to pay back the bank, or if you didn't pay back the bank, the accounts got closed, and a number of those things. And we do know that those were floating out there before the pandemic, and I imagine that they're still floating out there as well. So I imagine that that's some of the dark side of finance as well. But I don't know if that's what you meant by the dark side, or if you had something else in mind. But those are some of the dark sides that came to my mind automatically.
Well, there are a lot of dark sides of finance, unfortunately. And over this weekend, especially today, it's been a little bit tricky with a few bank failures, as you mentioned.
Right.
So that is a risky area. But I want to talk about how you can prevent things like that from happening, not on a system-wide basis, but from a personal point of view.
Right.
And I learned this a good way. I didn't get caught up in anything, but I mentioned before I studied finance in school, and I learned about things like a diversified portfolio, which means investments are in maybe 10 different things, 20 different things, up to 30 different investments. So there's not a lot of risk riding on one thing. So essentially it's the opposite of the expression putting your eggs all in one basket.
Right.
And my first job, I worked in investment banking here in New York, and I bought some shares of my employer when I'd worked there. And just from a finance point of view, it's risky to own a lot of the equity, the ownership in a business where you work, because one, you're getting your paycheck from there. And then two, there's the risk of the company, especially if it's publicly traded, that the share price goes up and down on a daily basis. I had bought shares into the employer, and I bought them at a good price. And essentially they had gone up to $165. And I actually had sold out because I felt that the company had a good run. Things are really, really well for them. And I didn't really think there was a whole lot of upside left to this company. And unfortunately, over the next couple of months, they ran into a lot of troubles, and the share price actually went to $2. And it was sad for a lot of people, unfortunately. But I had sold the shares long before that happened and diversified, like I said before, into a broader portfolio of 15 or 20 different investments. And when the bank eventually did go to $2 and it was then taken over, it didn't bother me. It didn't affect me. And that rule of diversification, that law of diversification, really stuck with me. So if there's someone out there who does have ownership in a company where they work for, the rule of thumb is that in terms of the portfolio, it shouldn't be more than 5% of your investment. So if you have $100 to invest, you should only have up to $5 in the stock of the company where you work.
Yeah, that makes sense. How much should you be prepared to deal with the loss of a job and everything in that space? Actually, was working this past week with a film festival at one of the cultural centers that I am part of and involved with here in Durham, North Carolina. And I do know that there was a friend of mine that has been involved in the nonprofit world and the world of documentary filmmaking for a number of years and worked for a certain organization that was in that space, and they recently got laid off. And as a matter of fact, seems like a pretty severe layoff at that particular company, which probably, didn't employ hundreds, but definitely employed probably 20 or 30. So I'm thinking maybe 10 to half of those were let go. And that's just a guesstimate based on the little bit of a conversation that I had with this coworker and everything. But then I'm wondering, they themselves told me that they did not have much of a severance package, and that they would, of course, be trying to figure out what to do in order to make additional money and in order to balance what the severance pay in addition to whatever other money that they're going to make in order to survive until the next opportunity creates itself, whether that is entrepreneurial type of jobs or whether that's going back into a corporate or nonprofit world. So how much do you think people are prepared for those? We're talking about the windfall, but the opposite can happen as well. So how much do you think people are prepared for that? And is that a strategy that people always need to have on hand, is to have a certain amount of money saved up just in case something like that was to happen, whether that's on the nonprofit world, the corporate world, or whatever the worlds may be?
Yes, people should save into what is called an emergency fund.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on the situation, the fund should comprise of a minimum of 3 months of your expenses up to 6 months of your expenses. And that all depends on your situation, whether you're single or if you're married, if there's your one income, two incomes, et cetera. So if there's only one income coming in, 6 months of living expenses is required. If there are two income household, then 3 months of expenses should be set aside in an account. And it should be an account that you cannot access, because like I said before about budgeting and behavior change, it's very important. So if people are prudent enough, they could set this up. If they feel like they may have trouble and maybe go to spend it if they want to buy something online, whether it's a DoorDash order or something on an online provider, I really feel that if it's really that hard for someone, they should actually go physically to a bank, set up an account at a bank, and have no online access. So if they really, really do need the money, they actually physically have to get up, walk to the bank, talk to a person, and take the money out. So it's a way to set up a structure where you're actually helping yourself. You're keeping the money out of your pocket and you're keeping it in the bank, so you're not spending it in a frivolous manner.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's the same thing with any sort of behavior change. Whether someone's trying to quit smoking cigarettes, they probably don't want to leave cigarettes lying around the house, right?
Right. Because I guess I was going to say that I guess the flip side of that is that like in both cases there are sudden, but sometimes the circumstances are not always prepared for. You just heard the commercial earlier with Nick talking about the pension funds and things of that nature, and that's definitely something that people need to be thinking about in retirement. But if those married couples, and I'm still in that single space, but if those, even at the age of 60, but if those married folks are been together for a while, you never know when the partner is going to pass away or not be here, or even in some cases leave because of divorce or whatever. But definitely you never know when you will become a widow or widower or something along those lines. I know that even in our own company, we've had that happen a couple of times that I'm aware of, and everything in different companies. But is that something that it was part of that emergency fund should also be covered as well? Because like I said, you want to stay with the person forever and a day, but you never know what health issues may cause that not to happen. And I don't know that people are always prepared to deal with retirement and next phases of life, including losing their partners and everything.
Yeah, when it comes to saving for retirement and living into old age, hopefully for some of these people who are no longer with us. The important thing to do is to have everything set up so your spouse, your partner, whomever really knows where everything is. And an easy way to really make sure that the money is transferred from one spouse to the next is to have your beneficiaries updated. And that's a very, very simple thing to do. You could do it on all your bank accounts, your savings accounts, your 401k, your IRA, and you essentially log in online to the custodian, whether it's the local bank, a large bank, 401k provider of where you work. And there is a beneficiary, or in some companies called it transfer on death, TOD, or payable on death, POD, depends on the business. But all three are the same. And you put in the person's name that you want the money to go to. And then in the untimely and hopefully unlikely event of someone's passing, that money will simply transfer over to the person you have listed as the beneficiary. It's a very seamless transition. It happens very smoothly. Whereas on the flip side, if you do not denote someone as a beneficiary on any of those accounts, the accounts will then go into a process called probate, which is a process run by the state where you live, and everything is made public. And essentially, a judge or a group of individuals will decide where the money goes. And that's just very long. It could be 6 months, 9 months, maybe a year. And they also take a fee from the accounts that are transferred. So to save yourself a lot of headaches and a lot of trauma, especially after losing a loved one, to have to go through that process is very, very stressing and taxing. So I would recommend that everyone updates all of their beneficiaries as they see fit. And also, it's also good to go back and review them at least once a year, because maybe you had a beneficiary on there who may have passed on, and that also leads to a big headache. So make sure that people are alive and well, and you're talking with them, and you have the current information up there that you see is comfortable for you and where you want the money to go.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. You know, there's an old cliche and everything, and there's actually another not that old cliche, but it is a fact and everything. And I'm just wondering your take on these old standards and everything. But if you hear people talking about money, a lot of times they will use this old cliche that money is the root of all evil. Not necessarily saying that I agree with that, but we do know that money can be used in lobbying forces and other ways. That is the reason that it has that saying and everything. And then a lot of times if you talk to people that are in relationships, whether that is in the single courting stage of the relationship or whether that is in the marriage aspect, they will oftentimes say that communications and finances are some of the leading reasons that we have the high divorce rates that we do, because a lot of times people are not as upfront as they should be about finances, and a lot of times people have materialistic goals that they don't always want to be made known, and sometimes that can be a deterrent to the relationship. I'll just leave it at that and everything. But I'm just wondering, how much do you see finance something that you have a deep passion about as having that ugly side that you mentioned earlier, not so much the dark side, but the ugly side? Because I have heard that cliche where people will still use, even into the year 2023, that money is the root of all evils. And I've definitely heard some people in both the marriage space as well as the dating space that have talked about how money, or the lack thereof, or misconceptions about money are the reasons that their relationships went south or sour.
When it comes to couples, there's always a difference between one person and the other when it comes to finances. You might think that it's not true, but it is. And that has to do with how each of the people grew up. What were their parents like? What kind of town did they grow up in? What jobs did people in their family or the town have? And those money scripts really influence the relationship that people have with money all of their lives. And they may not realize it because a lot of it is subconscious, but think about some things that maybe your parents told you about money when you were a kid. Does anything come to mind?
I mean, they definitely told us to try to save money, which me and my brother don't always do, but they definitely tried to tell us to be conscious of the money that we were spending. I don't remember an allowance, so I don't think I had one. I don't think my younger brother did either, but I did have friends that had allowances, and of course they were in the activism space and in the nonprofit space. So we did know the importance of getting money in order to even keep the nonprofit, because it was a radio station, a nonprofit radio station running. So I learned that at a very young age, because I did remember my mom writing for the grants to get the money. And of course, we were constantly making like telethon type pleas and everything to raise money and everything. So definitely I saw the importance of money just to keep the station up and running.
Sure. So, and that sticks with you as you've gone through life, right?
Yes.
And that's your relationship, and that's true for everyone. Whether it was similar to your story or something quite different,
Right.
those scripts really stick. So there could be a couple where one person, they like to spend, they want to go out to dinner, they want to go on vacation, they want to do this, they want to do that. And the other person may just want to max out their 401k so they have a nice retirement. And I think a lot of that needs to be talked about upfront in a relationship before there was a marriage or a long-term partnership. Just like anything else with a marriage, things that need to be talked about and discussed upfront, and then taken from there. And clearly things change as life goes on. Maybe someone gets a really great promotion and they're making more money, or on the flip side, someone could lose their job and really struggle for a long time with their earnings and what's happening. So I think really rolling with the punches is a good way to get through it, and really be clear and be upfront about what it is that you want and how you want to plan your financial future with someone.
No, that makes sense. But as you were saying that, I was just thinking that sometimes people don't even understand the nature of money, because I know one of the topics that you have said that you can definitely talk about it is the notion of money worship and money status and things along those lines. And I am sometimes amazed at how sometimes even in that relationship space, people discount folks because they don't think that they are making enough money, or that they are not in the right class or the right whatever kind of relationship. But in my observation, and I'm sure that you may have observed this as well, because I know that your dad had that auto dealership, and I was actually going to make a comment and ask you a question about that in a minute too. But a lot of times people discount the blue collar plumber, and I actually had an uncle that was involved in that space, or the blue collar bricklayer, or the blue collar truck driver. And I've known people in all three of those fields, and I know for a fact that sometimes they can make as much money, if not more money, than the doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs. And sometimes they don't have as much debt because they went through the trade school route versus the 12 or 16 years that you got to go to school if you want to become a doctor, and you're not promised that big hospital that first time around. So you might want to end up working for a small clinic or something that's not paying all that well. But it's that status aspect that can go with life as well, and part of that is the perceived money status. So I just wondered, is that something that you observed as well, and your thoughts around that?
In terms of people,
the money status and the money worship, and people kind of like not giving enough credence to those that have blue collar jobs, when blue collar jobs can actually be making some pretty decent money.
Yes. There are the concepts of money status, money worship. Money status is buying things to show off, so to speak, whether it's a new car, big house, whatever the case is. And then money worship is a little bit different, where people never think that they have enough saved, or it's never enough. And they're not viewing it as a bad way, but they're always worried that the money's going to run out at some point in their life. And when it comes to the difference between, whether it's white collar or blue collar, there are vast differences in both. There are many blue collar people who do much better than white collar people, and vice versa. And a lot of that comes down to how people are with their money. If they're smart, if they're saving, if they're diversifying their investments, and really being consistent, really being steady with it. Just like anything else, it's good habits to get into, whether you're running or eating well or other form of exercise. I really think that having those good habits around money will help, whether it's a blue collar job or a white collar job, really help someone get where they want to go and have a really great financial future, whether it's, buying a nice home, saving for retirement, or whatever the other, fill in the blank for whatever the person wants. They could craft what it is that they want to do with their life.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I did say that I had read that your father had that auto dealership, and a lot of times and we actually do a show later on this day because it's every Monday that deals with the auto industry and all in that space. It's usually at 9 o'clock, and of course they talk about the different. Mr. McCleary does behind the Experience the Car Show is the name of it, but he talks about the financing of cars as well as the different types of cars because he works at a car dealership down in Valdosta, Georgia, and everything. But I was just wondering, with that in mind, there are stereotypes with that particular job as well, and one of those is that they are very much about the money, about making the sale, and not necessarily being concerned about the consumer. And I've had friends that are in the car dealership lane, so I don't necessarily buy that stereotype. But I just wondered, is that something that you had to deal with growing up, and did it push some of your own thoughts around the financing and financial responsibility? Because I do know that, when people think about careers with negative stereotypes, being a car dealer is one of them.
Yes, that's a common stereotype, unfortunately. But in the town where I grew up in, it was a very small town, and word of mouth is the form of communication.
Right.
And being upfront with people, being honest, is really the only way to run a business the right way in a small town. So it was much, much different than you think about the typical stereotype when it comes to someone selling cars. To answer your other question around the financing and the business end of things, yes, I learned that a lot by working there. Clearly selling a good car, dependable car is important, but also really doing it in a way that really helps the person and provides for the community. And then there's the ongoing maintenance. There's oil changes, there's state inspections, things break on a car, new tires are a common occurrence, right? And I think just being able to service the customer and doing it at a fair price and doing it in a quick manner are really important things to do. And everyone really appreciated it in our hometown. And my father's been doing it it's actually going to be 50 years this summer.
Yeah. He's been doing it for a number of years. Probably seeing both the parents and grandparents, and maybe even the kids get in their cars. So he's probably seen about at least 2, if not 3 generations of folks that are buying cars from him in that small town. And it definitely sounds like he is a core part of that town's business culture and everything in that space. How important do you think it is for entrepreneurs to make themselves known and attached to the towns and cities that they are known in and from? I mean, I imagine it's harder to do in New York. Of course, you can attach yourself to the neighborhood that you're from. So like if you're from Little Italy, you can attach yourself to the Little Italy community as opposed to the bigger New York. But if you're from a small town, I know a lot of business owners that are proud to be members of the Chamber of Commerce, proud to be members of the Rotary Club, and proud to be members of a number of other organizations that will keep them affiliated, not just with their business, but with the town in general. So how important do you think it is for businesses to have that community engagement?
I think it's very important because the business can exist out the community and vice versa. So it's a very good relationship. It's a very good idea for whether they're entrepreneurs, small business owners, service business, product business. It's very important for them to be engaged and be committed with the local community, whether it's sponsoring the Little League team or donating money for the annual 4th of July parade, for example. I think it's all very important for a business to do to really give back and show that they care for the locals who live in and around where they work.
And along those same lines, one of the things that oftentimes surprises me about businesses, no matter what the type of business is, it can be an art business, it can be a nonprofit, it can be a for-profit business, is how many of them do not have a prospectus, do not have a business plan, and oftentimes don't even have the proper business documentation from the state level. So I just wondering, maybe that's more of a North Carolina thing, or do you find similar things up there in New York and other parts of the Northeast that you are involved with? Because I know that, you just about ask anybody and they would tell you that they've got a business, got an entrepreneurship thing going on. But then when you ask them for specifics, like if you need specific business plans, if they're asking you to invest in them and everything, or if you need specific knowledge that they're actually a business certified by the state and everything, then it sometimes becomes harder for them to find that. So I just wonder, is that strictly something that I've observed down here in the South, or is that a nationwide trend that we've got to do something about? Because I'm oftentimes shocked at how many people don't have business plans.
It is a nationwide trend, unfortunately, that there's not the proper business plan or perhaps the proper legal setup for the business from day one. That's a very, very common occurrence. And I think doing it right from day one, although it will be more expensive than a business owner wants in the beginning, it's worth it in the long run, because if a couple of years go by, then all of a sudden you need to redo things. It could be a lot more expensive, a lot more time consuming, and a much, much bigger headache.
Yeah, I can definitely see it being a bigger headache if you don't do the proper things in that space. That would definitely be a major headache. But unfortunately, too many people are doing that, just kind of like living off of the dole of whatever support that they get from family, or sometimes stringing several jobs together in order to make ends meet as well. What kind of because I do know part of what your company does is trying to get some of these startups their support and everything that they need. And I know sometimes they will go to venture capitalists, sometimes they will look at equity, and they'll look at things like that. And I'm oftentimes fascinated by the people that are apprehensive about equity and about venture capitalists because of some of the past history around venture capital. But I was just wondering, are those two that you usually strongly recommend, and how much do you think people are knowledgeable about venture capital even? Because I know a lot of times people want to invest in all kinds of projects, maybe even film projects, or maybe even a storefront, that they want to have a storefront restaurant or a storefront store. And they oftentimes won't even know about equity and or venture capital as options. So are those the primary two options that you look at, or are there other ones that you think that startups, particularly tech startups, because this is around here in North Carolina, is a strong tech environment. So I know that I do have some tech folks that listen. So what are some of the ones that you think folks should be looking at in terms of getting their initial funding?
Yeah, when it comes to tech, definitely venture capital is a big funding source for technology companies as they start and they grow and hopefully become successful. So yes, that is a very important lifeblood, so to speak, for those kinds of businesses. On the other end, with smaller businesses or owner operator kind of places, a lot of that is bootstrapped by the individual person. And there could be some financing from the local bank, local credit union, et cetera, because it's a much different business in terms of what a venture capital company would invest in. But depending on what the business owner wants to do, where their company is, where they see the vision going, the financing will hopefully fit the company appropriately.
How important do you, because it seems like everybody and their mother is a coach, their business coaches, their financial coaches, their health coaches, everybody is a coach these days. How important do you think it is to have a financial coach in your life, whether that's one in your personal bank or whether that's one that is separate, or maybe it's even a family counselor, or maybe it's somebody that's tied to finances with your local church and things of that nature? But how important do you think coaching is in general, and more specifically having a financial coach on your team?
I think it's incredibly important because there's always a good viewpoint to have a third party. You have someone who is holding you accountable for a financial piece of work or an investment or something else that you need to do in your financial life. So I think it's very important to have someone not only help you and guide you, but also push you to change a little bit in areas that will benefit you in the short term and the long term. So I really, really think those are good ideas. And also, everything changes. Markets go up and down. The tax laws continually change, and people's lives change, whether they're living here, living there, working this job, or moving careers. So I really think it's beneficial to have someone to essentially talk to and ask a lot of questions and really try to figure out, hey, am I making the right financial decision with this?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The other thing I was curious about is a lot of times people come into a job at one pay scale and they know that they need to ask for a raise at some point or another, but that can be one of the most intimidating questions, whether you're in the nonprofit world or the for-profit world, to go for. So how much do you feel that people should be actively pursuing what their worth is and everything. Because I know a lot of times people will talk themselves constantly out of going in and asking for that raise. One, because there's the fear that the boss may not give you the raise, and two, they may think that you're asking for too much and then let you go altogether. So I know that that's part of the fear factor that people have. But I just wonder, do you think that enough people are asking for their compensation that they should be getting for their careers based on the type of work that they're doing? Or is that another one of those observations where, like I said, too many people are being intimidated by their personal fears or by outside fears of what has happened to either their friends when they asked or what they have heard has happened to people if they don't see employees around as much as they used to?
It's always important for employees to know what they're worth and to get paid a wage or a salary that's appropriate with their skill level.
Right.
Also, employees should ask for raises. Obviously, not on a weekly basis. That's a little bit too often. But whether it's annually, biannually, whatever the cadence is, it's really important for them to be paid what they're worth. And as they grow with the business, accept on more responsibilities, get promoted, manage people, there's a lot more going on. So I think it's well and good and also appropriate for people to ask at the proper times for just increases and fair increases in their salaries.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know a lot of times people do not want to go toward financial experts. And sometimes people are even a little bit apprehensive about banks and everything. So how important do you think it is to have a banking account? And also, do you think that people should be looking at possibly having more than one banking account? Because I know some people that will tell you that they've got one banking account for one business, maybe another banking account for family or another business. And even know some people that even to this day will tell you that they have literally, and I know it's a figurative expression, but sometimes they mean it literally, put some money, underneath the mattress for a rainy day. They've got some money saved and tucked away wherever that may be. In some cases, like with the women, it might even be in their bra, but they've got some money tucked away for that rainy day and everything. But I was just wondering, how important, one, do you think it is to have more than one account, if it's important? And two, is it all right to have money that is outside of the banking system that is, tucked away in a coffee tin or something?
Well, I think that it all depends on what level of money we're dealing with here. Because bank accounts are insured as long as it's an FDIC insured bank. They are insured up to $250,000 for a bank account, and that limit is by person, by account, by institution. So essentially, you would need to have a lot of money at one bank to lose it if things went the wrong way, because the FDIC will insure you for your money as long as it's within the limits. So I think having one account in that regard is fine. You mentioned before about having like a business account. I'm not an attorney, but clearly a business account for the banking should be separate from the personal. That's very common. That's what a lot of people do. And then your other piece about having some, petty cash around the house. Yeah, sure, you could have a couple bucks lying around, but I wouldn't have a lot lying around because it could disappear, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is very much the case. And everything, you never know how it would disappear, whether it would walk out with two legs or just get misplaced and roll out. And we all know that the linen can take clothes as well. So the washing machine loves to eat socks, and it also loves to eat money sometimes as well. So definitely that is ways that money can disappear and everything. What are some of the finance lessons that you have learned over your career that have surprised you? I know we've alluded to some of them, but what are some of the things that have surprised you that might surprise others that they hear about it from me now asking you these questions? But what are some things that have surprised you about the state of finances and personal finances and just your own career in this lane?
Well, I've been doing finance for a long time, so I'm at the point where nothing surprises me. I did live through the financial crisis back in 2008, and that was very surprising, very eye-opening. So having done that at a very young age really gave me a lot of perspective, whether it was for better or for worse. So at this juncture, I would say that nothing really phases me.
That makes sense. But on that same line, we just had the Oscars, and of course, there have been historically some movies that dealt with Wall Street and dealt with the stock market. But are there any of those movies that resonated with you that you felt were on point, or were many of them like that movie Wall Street that some people felt were way off target, but then other people will tell you that Pursuit of Happiness was somewhat on target and everything. So I just wondered from a cultural standpoint whether there was any movies or books that you felt were on point. I know that one of the shows that we do regularly here, we bring in Bill Danko, who wrote The Millionaire Next Door, and a lot of folks, even though that book was written, I believe, in the 90s, still find the book to be very pertinent even to this particular day and time and everything. But I was just wondering if there were any movies or books that when you saw them, you're like, that's the way I remember Wall Street when I worked there.
Well, the book you mentioned, The Millionaire Next Door, is a book that I read a long time ago. It actually had a very profound impact on me when it came to actually saving money and doing things the right way. Much like the Mr. Klein story I told you earlier, I felt that hearing the story from Mr. Klein at a young age and then reading this book 5 or 6 years later, I was like, whoa, this is like pretty similar to what he was telling me. So that book was actually very helpful, very eye-opening. When it comes to books, I would go a little bit different from books. I would say that all of the annual shareholder letters from Warren Buffett from the company Berkshire Hathaway are very good reading. You'll learn a lot from those. So if you have some time, you can go to the website and download those and really get to understand the wisdom of one of the greatest investors that has ever lived.
Yeah, that makes sense. Which actually brought the other question that I was going to get to at some point or another, which is that too often people think of finance as being one of those very heady fields and one of those very boring fields. We know that it's something that is essential to our day-to-day life and everything. But how do you get past that stereotype? Because I'm sure that folks are oftentimes thinking about somebody in the financial lane as, being not exciting, not boring, and it is a very brain-oriented type topic and everything, and that it can be very boring. Now, you've been giving me a whole conversation for a little bit over an hour here, and I haven't been bored yet and everything, so I think that you probably do a good job, but how do you get past that? And I'm sure that, not sure what your current life status is, but I'm sure that when you were in the dating pool, if you're not in the dating pool now, as soon as you said you were in the finances, some people might have run the other way. One, because they didn't want to deal with their own financial drama, and two, because they were thinking that it was a very boring field when they wanted to be with the quote unquote exciting people.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because a lot of times if I'm at a social event, if I don't want to talk to someone and they ask, what do you do? I say, I write a blog about financial planning, and they usually go to the other side of the room. But all joking aside, I think that finance, it could be very interesting for some people. It could be incredibly boring for others. I can imagine people's eyes glazing over when they look at numbers or try to read through documents related to certain kinds of accounts. So I really think it depends on the person. But from my point of view, what I try to do when I work with clients is to make it relatable to them, make them understand it. And whether it's through telling stories or just being really straightforward with what we're trying to do, I find that really helps a lot of people who aren't really that akin to really loving and getting into the weeds of finance.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think that, speaking of that whole notion of the boring aspect of it and everything, and the blog, what was one of the most interesting blogs that you have written and that resonates with you? I'm sure that there must be a blog or two that still resonate with you, even though you've been writing the blog now for a while. And I was just wondering what those entries were that resonated with you, and if you can tell folks how they can find your blog and how often the blog comes out.
Yes, I write a weekly blog. It's on fortrovepartners.com. That's FORTROVE, partners, plural.com. There's been many blogs that I enjoyed, writing, but it's hard to pick. It's hard to pick the favorite one. I would say the one that's the most popular. I would go with the one that's most popular was one that I wrote last year. It was about actually going to yoga. I was trying to do yoga on my own for a number of years, but I would go to class and I just felt lost around how do I put my arm, when do I breathe, what do I do? So I went for lessons with an instructor, and she was very, very helpful. Really taught me the ropes around positioning and mindset and breathing. And I feel a lot of times that you're working with a professional, whether it's a yoga instructor or a finance person, can really help move you in a direction that you couldn't really figure out or that you even knew about on your own.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think because we've got another show that deals with uh, the metaverse and to some degree augmented reality and virtual reality, do you think that there is any danger at any point that banking, like the medical industry and like the restaurant industry, possibly might be going all virtual or all tech, and we won't be having folks like you or folks like the neighborhood banker that we go to see to do our banking? We might be going there and visiting a robot and maybe going on a vacation through the whole virtual or augmented reality space. And I'm just wondering if that's something that is of a concern to you, because definitely the finance industry has been one that has definitely resonated with some technology changes, but a lot of things is just a good old fashioned banking that we were doing even way back in like the Wild Wild West kind of days in terms of going up to the cashier and things in that space. But this is a new day and a new time. So I was wondering, do you think that we will ever get to a more modern version of banking, or is this something that will stay with us as it's been for the duration of time?
I don't think it'll change all that much. It'll be with us for the duration of time. And as an example, on Friday, there was a bank on the West Coast that failed, and regulators, people had to step in to actually figure everything out because a lot of money was at stake and a lot of people were very angry, and things were smoothed out over the weekend with the people who had their money at that certain institution. So I really think that technology will help. It will provide a lot of services and make things smoother and easier and more timely for people. But there will always be a need for people to work with other people or really understand what's happening in times of whether it's times like now, whether things are a little bit uncertain, or when times are awesome and great. That's
Yeah,
always going to be needed.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know that part of the work that your company does is with tech startups and just startups in general. So, what are some of the tech type startups that you are looking at? And are there any other startups in general that y'all look at? And what are some of the criteria that people need to be thinking about if they're thinking about reaching out to y'all to get help in launching whatever business they may be thinking about in those spaces?
Well, I advise on both people who start tech companies and also individuals who are employees at tech companies that are publicly traded. So it's both, but there is a technology piece to both types of clients.
And the advice that you would give to those folks that are thinking about going into that tech startup space, or just the spaces that you are familiar with in general?
Well, right now it's a really challenging time, given that markets have shifted over the past 15 months, and technology has been one of the sectors that has been struggling, unfortunately. But I've always thought that when things are maybe not going that well, when times are tough, it's a great time to start a business because things are a little bit uncertain. People are a little bit scared. But if someone's able to come up with a good product or a good service and put it to use to benefit people, that would be really great for everyone involved.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But one of the things I've been seeing, and part of it was COVID induced, part of it was even before COVID, was it seems like everybody and their mother is an entrepreneur of some sort. And I do know that with the failure rate of restaurants being high, that I'm thinking the failure rate of entrepreneurs can be high as well. Because as a good friend of mine put it, everybody's a promoter until it's time to cut the check. Because he used to be the the rental coordinator at one of our local theaters and everything. And of course, everybody and their mother had an idea for a concert or a play or something that they wanted to bring in. But then when he had to give them the proposed amount that they would need to pay in order to secure the facility, that's when they would disappear. And that's when he came up with this saying that everybody's a promoter until it's time to cut the check, meaning that they have seen the budget and know that they don't have that money at their disposal. And I would argue that that's probably happened with a lot of entrepreneurs, that everybody's got these great ideas and plenty of entrepreneurship that is developing. It is at the core of American value, but I do sometimes wonder if we are not overstretching ourselves with our entrepreneurship. But I don't know if that's an agreed on statement that you would agree with, or do you think that there is room for another million entrepreneurs?
Well, historically, most entrepreneurs don't succeed in their businesses. The odds are stacked against them, unfortunately. But the ones that do survive build great and lasting businesses. And I think as part of the ethos in America, that someone could come here or be born here or whatever the circumstances are, and they could actually have that rags to riches story by building their own business, doing it the way they want to do it. So there's always going to be opportunity for that in the US, because the system is set up in a way that it encourages entrepreneurship. You think about some of the biggest, greatest companies over the past 100 years, more than likely they started here in the good old US of A.
Yeah, no doubt about that and everything. The two questions I get everybody to answer at the end of the show, and I do apologize that I was not catching track of the chat and everything, is how folks can reach you. And you did allude to that earlier, but if you want to give folks how they can reach you. And then the other question I get everybody to ask on all of these shows is, we do know that this is a very trying time. We just got through and are still getting through COVID. Of course, the war in Ukraine is going on. A number of other things are going on. So one of the things that I try to get all my guests to do is give a message of positivity and hope for the world. It's kind of like my little contribution to world peace and everything, is trying to send some encouraging words through the platforms that I have, and all in that way. So any message of positivity and hope that you can give to the world, and any last minute thoughts that you have, and definitely how folks can reach you, and then we'll get out of here. And I do apologize for not keeping track of the chat as much as I should have been.
In terms of messages of positivity, I think that there's always opportunity, especially in the US. And I think you always need to look for it and stay positive and really do it in a way that you work well with others, because a lot of ideas, wealth, love, come to and from others. So I think it's best to live that way going forward.
That makes a lot of sense. And if you tell folks how they can reach you and any other last minute thoughts that you have, and then I'll put on one of these quick commercials, and then I'll get on out of here with you as well. But I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I hope that you'll come back. We do have some shows around finances, including the Wall Street Hacker, and including Modern Investment, and a number of other shows as well. And then, of course, I'd love to have you back on one of my shows, whether it's this one or whether it's the Online Dinner Party or a number of other ones. Sometimes it's a one-on-one like this has been. Sometimes it's a group discussion. But either way, you've been a great person in terms of conversation, and I do hope that you will make a return trip.
Yes, I thank you for the invite, Mark, and I appreciate the time. I would love to come back to talk with you or come to one of the dinner parties. That would be fantastic. But in the interim, people can find me on my website. It's fortrovepartners.com, FORTROVE partners.com. And you could find out on there how to contact me and get in touch, read my blog, and learn about any other sort of financial concerns you may have, given what's going on in the world.
Well, I greatly appreciate it. We're going to go out of here with a commercial about workplace culture. And that's actually from a friend of mine as well. And we might get Trevi and her motivational book, but I'll let you get on to your next call and everything. But this has been a fun conversation, and we definitely look forward to having you come back in the very near future.
Thank you so much, Mark. Have a great day.
Do the same.
Bye.
Bye.
You know that song, More Than Words? Gosh, I hope your culture is just more than words. More than words on a wall, more than words in a handbook, more than words on a website. More than words. How is your culture showing up, living and breathing every single day? Food for thought. My name's Shelley Smith, and I am your culture curator.
What has time told you about the power of friendship in your life? Hi, I'm Trevi A. McDonald, author of the novel Time Will Tell, a coming-of-age story about the power of friendship in the lives of 3 Chicago women who are attending their 10-year high school reunion, and the sequel, Roundabout Midnight, a story about resolving issues, healing hurts, and celebrating Black love. You can find out more about my books at my website, www.drtrevi.com. Thank you.